Well, it's great to welcome Paul Newsome from Swim Smooth back onto the show. Paul, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you very much, Rob. Thanks for having me on again.
We had a wonderful response from our first episode. We talked tons and tons of tips for training for open water. So I thought best to get you back on and let's focus on this episode on tips for racing and open water. I view this as becoming like an evergreen content episode because every year we get the same thing when the race season starts. I've got to go into open water and race. I'm really confident in the pool. I'm absolutely terrified about getting into open water to race. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to get you back on. I really believe you are one of the world's leading swim coaches and also one of the world's leading experts on open water swimming. So the crossover of that and the passion that you've got for helping coach and teach people, you're the man to get on to help us with all these anxieties. So let's jump into it.
I'll slip you a fiver later on. Thanks, mate.
First up then, let's talk about some of the common challenges people are going to face when they're racing in open water. What are the common challenges people are going to face, do you think, when they get into race open water for the first time? Or the first time in the season, even?
Yeah, first time in the season. I mean, firstly, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, chances are the water temperature is going to be pretty cold. So that does freak out people quite a bit at the start of the event. Just making sure that you acclimate properly, you get in there slowly. I'm not a big fan, to be honest with you, of just diving straight into cold water. I like to actually
agree.
Take my time. I'll bend down, splash my face with some water, basically get some water down the suit and just make myself feel a little bit accustomed to that. And then I'll just literally count down in my head 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I've got to go on zero. I've just got to set off at that point. So I'll just dive into the water. And, it's really important, I think, to think to yourself, okay, look, whether you're navigating your way over to the start of an event or that is the start as soon as you've actually hit the water, is just to think to yourself, okay, calm myself down, focus on the basics, focus on the breathing, get your exhalation happening, bubble, breathe, as basic as that might be, sort of thing, but it will actually just get you out there and in and amongst it. But the other major thing, I think, especially if it's either your first triathlon or the first triathlon or open water event of the season, is just the fact that you've probably lost a little bit of condition with respect to having all these other bodies and people swimming around you, banging into you and bumping on top of you and that type of thing. So you can be in absolutely primo shape and condition in the pool leading into your first triathlon event. And then you get there in the open water and everything, the wheels just fall off sort of thing. And you think, oh my God, what the hell? And you're getting slapped around your head and so-and-so's bumping into you, or you're getting an elbow into your side and all these sort of things. People often refer to it as a great big washing machine effect. And there's probably no better descriptor, to be honest with you, than that, and I find myself over the course of a season, you just, whilst you regain some of those open water race specific skills, just the familiarization of actually knowing that is what's going to happen at the start. I think, the other thing to sort of bear in mind as well is that, I've definitely been party to having a few vicious punches. I broke my nose once. Somebody punched me right in the nose, and
really,
my big beak here. I've actually still got I've got like a big crack in my nose there. It happened during an open water event, and that was definitely a malicious attack. But to be honest with you, everybody is just trying to get from A to B. And if somebody swings an arm left or right and it happens to catch you, chances are it's not a malicious thing. And, it's hard to sort of see past that in the heat of it all. But the most important thing is just try to keep your composure at that point in time. And, if you get your hand knocked and then you go to take a breath and you get splashed in the face sort of thing, just think, okay, I'm just going to go again. I'll just go rotate out to the other side. I've got splashed on the right, I'll rotate out to the left. And you just keep moving. One step at a time, basically, based on that. And it's always worked well for me in the end, apart from that time I didn't got the nose broken.
Got the malicious one. Someone targeted you, hey? I always think there's these three things for the open water. It's the temperature, it's the suit fitting, and it's the people around you. And I think you talked last time that you were on about the importance of getting your suit right before you go in the water and how restrictive it can feel. One of the things we did on our Mallorca training camp was we had a lot of experienced athletes there. And I said, look, I'm going to teach you guys to suck eggs a little bit here, but let's talk about how you get your suit on. And almost all of the 20 athletes had never seen or thought about the fact, the thing you talked last time, going in the water, pulling the neck of the suit down, letting water in, walking out of the water and like sort of squeegeeing the water down the suit. Wetsuits are designed to be effective when they're wet. And when you put them on the dry, I think it's really, really hard to do this in the UK when it's cold, because the last thing you want to do is let cold water down the front, but it fits so much better. So one of the tips one of the guys said was he takes a thermos flask of 1 litre of warm water with him and pours that down the front of the suit before he even goes into the water. And that sort of vacuum seals it to his body. I thought, what a great idea there's no reason this has to be like a punishment. You have to take the cold water. Let's make it as comfortable as it can possibly be.
That's a great tip. I thought you were going to say he was going to pee in his wetsuit without actually being in the water there.
Yeah, we're not going to encourage that.
We're not going there. But no, that's a great tip. Yeah, really, really good tip to do is that. Funny enough, it just, as soon as you said about the thermos there, it reminded me of when we were training up for the English Channel in 2011, a group of 8 of us over here in Perth were actually training together for that. And honestly, it was amazing. Like some of the swims that we did were about 11, 12, 13 degrees Celsius, and we'd be in there for 6 or 7 hours at a time. And we used to look forward to actually getting the thermos, the hot thermos that was still warm, getting out. And there were no showering facilities or anything, but just pouring some warm water over yourself. It was the best shower I've ever had. Like, it's just, you just look forward to it so much after those long cold swims. So yeah, I'd never thought about doing it myself, actually, pre getting in for the swim, but it makes total sense. You know, if it's really, really cold water, then you're going to be not as inclined to actually get the lake water down your neck, sort of thing, but you might be with a little bit of lukewarm water to put it down there for sure. Obviously, just watch out for the temperature differential between the two, but yeah.
And the other thing you said as well about getting your face used to the temperature, I think we mentioned last time, didn't we? How it feels when you first get in is not how it's going to feel after 3 minutes. And those first 3 minutes, I don't know about you, but I get into the cold water and my brain just goes, why are you doing this? I hate this. It's horrible. I can't do this. It's too cold. I can't breathe. And I have to consciously sort of tell myself, it's going to be different in 3 minutes time. Keep your head in the water, keep your face in the water. And then all of that passes. But it's such a challenge, I think, for the first few minutes when you are in the cold to really get to grips with the idea that it's not going to feel like this in a few minutes time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think on the last show, we talked a little bit about, you know, the things which sort of stir your emotions and stir the anxiety. They might not actually be real at all, but if you've built them up in your head to become real, it often feels like that, you know. And for somebody who's done sports and exercise science, you'd think I'd have actually fact checked this next point here, but I'm just going to go with it. So prior to doing the English Channel, one of my very good friends, and was actually my mentor and tutor when I was on the British triathlon team back in, oh my God, really showing my age here, back in 1998, 1999, is a guy called Dr. Greg White, or Professor Greg White now.
Yeah. We've had Greg on the show, actually.
Have you? Fantastic. He's a great guy.
Great guy.
Awesome guy. So Greg happened to be over in Perth, and a couple of years prior to that, he'd swum across the English Channel with David Walliams, or Coach David Walliams, the comedian, and now the storybook writer, to swim across there. And I'd lost contact with Greg for years, actually. Would have been at least 10 years I hadn't spoken to him. And I managed to actually get in touch with him somehow and dropped him a line. He said, I'm actually going to be out in Perth next week. I was like, oh, what amazing fortitude and luck that is. It's brilliant. So I went and watched him talk to all these professors about cardiology. And like for somebody, I knew Greg when he was a sports scientist, but what he's done in the cardiology world and stuff, it's just, mind blowing, to see all these professors listening up to somebody who was also, initially a sports physiologist, talk to them about the heart and disease and stuff like that. It was absolutely incredible. But I'm digressing slightly here, as I tend to do. So Greg sat down with us and I said, look, I've got me and 7 of my mates. We're going to do the English Channel. What are your tips for swimming across the English Channel, especially with respect to getting in cold water? Because we're all really nervous about it. And he said, well, first off, the ideal shape to swim across the English Channel is to be a complete circle. And what he meant by that is obviously larding up and putting on some body fat, which I did profusely leading up to the English Channel, and probably still trying to lose it now a decade later. But one of the things he did talk about, and this is where I haven't fact checked this, but it made a lot of sense. And even if it's not totally true, you should try it yourself next time you go for an open water swim and just tell yourself, okay, this is working for me. So what Greg said was, he said, go down to the water's edge, take your goggles off, rest them on your forehead and splash your face. He said, because there are a lot of receptors around the eye socket which actually detect temperature, specifically when you're actually getting into the water, which can trigger a gasp response. And he said, if you can actually sort of acclimate those or customize them to what you're going to feel, it can actually help to stop that initial panic response. So like I say, I've never fact checked that, but I've been telling that same thing to people for over a decade now, because I simply tried it, right? I went down to the river and it made a lot of sense for me and it simply worked, And this is the interesting thing about science. Greg is a brilliant physiologist. He's into the cardiology and all of that sort of stuff, but he's also a realist as well. He's very much into applied sports and exercise science, which was what I was passionate about at university. It's not necessarily about how much research you do on these things. It's about trying it and putting it out there and just trying that, just seeing what works for you. And that was a tip which he gave me, and I've passed on to literally thousands of people ever since. And I'm hoping it's helped them like it's helped me,
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm sure that the gasp reflex thing, people can try this even in a cold shower. If you put your shower on the coldest setting and just let your face go under it, it's really hard to not sharply inhale, but it passes really quickly after 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And I'm sure that would be it's not a really scary thing for people to do at the start of a triathlon, is it, to splash the cold water on the face a bit for the benefit it's going to bring them.
Yeah, I mean, you even see the great competitors in the pool doing it as well before they actually get in. They splash themselves. It's a little bit of like a bravado, macho type of thing. Who can splash the most and stuff like that, and who can make themselves look the coolest. But there's definitely an element to that, just getting your body prepared for it and doing it. It's really funny actually, because over here I've got a bit of a thing where, because I'm from England and they're all Aussies over here, obviously, everyone just assumes that I'm great in the open water, in the cold open water, because I'm from England and you guys know what it's like to be cold and stuff like that. I do actually genuinely believe I have got like some sort of physiological thing going on, which allows me to swim in very, very cold waters for long periods of time and not get too freaked out by it. Yeah. I actually personally really, really enjoy it. I didn't initially when I first got into it, sort of thing, but it's just become, there was a situation where we went and did a 10K open water swim up in a cold lake, and it was 12 degrees and 1.5 degree air temperature. And we'd said to ourselves, right, we're going to swim 10Ks in here. And after about 30 minutes, I saw everybody else out on the banks having a barbecue. And I was like, the last thing I'm going to do right now is get out of the water. I'm going to get this 10K done. I'm going to swim it at 12 degrees and 1.5 degrees Celsius. And from that moment onwards, it became like a bit of a thing for me. It was like, okay, I managed to survive that. I got through it. Maybe I pushed it a little bit far, sort of thing, because it took me hours to warm up after that. But it became a little bit of a psychological thing. And I've got the same thing with rough open water swimming as well. I went down and did the Brighton Triathlon probably in the late 90s. It was with British Elite Triathlon Championships back then. And it was a really, really rough day. And I'd actually broken my collarbone a few months earlier racing in the south of France with the British team. And I went to this event. It was the last open water triathlon of the season. It was the national championships, and it was my first open water triathlon of the season because I'd missed the entire season because of the collarbone thing, and it was super rough. And I remember just getting out there and just thought, I love this craziness, like, ah. And I came out, I was like out the water with Stuart Hayes and just in front of Tim Don and out the bike with those guys and Richard Allen, you know, mentioning some names from the past. And to this day, it was still probably one of the best open water swims I've ever had. But it almost became a compounding thing. It was like, okay, I've achieved there in rough open water, therefore I'm a good rough open water swimmer. I don't actually know if that's the case or not, but I don't care, because in my head I've told myself that story for so long now that I've almost become it. I've owned it. I am that swimmer.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good tip we can extrapolate out for other people, which is once you've done something for the first time, you can then build on that in your brain. And one of the common emails I get is, me and my friend have entered Ironman UK, and it's going to be the first triathlon we ever do. And it's like the macho hook that someone's hanging this on. We're going to do this really hard thing, but it's going to be the first thing we do. No, like don't make it the first thing you do. You've got to build up to these things. And every time you get in the cold water, it's going to be easier the next time you get in the cold water. But you don't want the first time that you get into the open water to be your first race of the season or your first triathlon ever.
No, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, building up is really quite important. And yeah, I think, you know, if you can start to almost own some of those positive experiences and, you know, learn from some of the negative ones as well, you know, what didn't work quite so well, you know, were you drifting off course? Why was that happening? Is it related to your stroke technique? Was it something else? Then you can really, really own it from there, basically. I did a swimming session for a lady called Catherine Foe a few years ago. Foe spelled F-X.
I remember Cat, yeah.
Cat. So Cat at that point in time held the Hawaii Ironman world record as an age grouper. So a brilliant athlete. And she was looking at thinking, okay, I'm going to step up to the pro ranks. And she was doing some study as well at that point in time. And it was a big question about whether or not she was actually going to make that jump. But the big thing was for her biking and running was at least as good as most of the pros out there. The differentiator was her swimming just wasn't quite where it needed to be. She was about 5 or 6 minutes slower than she needed to be in the water. And, you know, I work with pros or semi-pros like her all the time for that very reason. It's like, how much would this transform my ultimate Ironman performance if I can get my swimming that little bit better or come out the water a little bit fresher, so I'm able to dominate on the bike and run like I know I can do. And I took Kat for this session. I think it was up in the Midlands somewhere. It was quite a long time ago. And basically, when I'm looking at somebody and trying to ascertain how they can improve their swimming, rather than actually just thinking about it purely on their technique, I'm asking myself one of three things. I'm asking myself, okay, is their technique sound? You know, what's holding them back with the technique? Are they doing the right type of training? And how well do they adapt to the open water? And Kat was a bit of an enigma, to be honest with you, because when she jumped in, she told me, I'm swimming such and such a time. It was like just under an hour for the Ironman. I looked at her technically in the water and she's actually swimming really well. I was like, wow, you're only swimming 59 minutes for an hour and you're swimming this well technically. And then I had a chat with her and a coach about the type of training she was doing. And she prescribes all the stuff about CSS-based training, red mist endurance cycles, and all those sort of things, which you know, we've published in our book and on our blogs over the years and on YouTube videos. And, you know, she was ticking all the boxes. And then I asked her about the open water and I said, you know, so how often do you practice in the open water? And she goes, I don't. So what do you mean you don't practice in the open water? She says, I only ever swim in the open water when it's a race. And I said, so what does that feel like? She says, well, I hate swimming around other people. So I just try and find some free water basically by myself. And I was like, well, that's your problem right there. You know, you can save up to 38% of your energy expenditure by drafting well off somebody and or become faster just by hanging on to their toes or sitting slightly off on their hip and those sort of things. And yeah, that was the thing. After an hour and a half of this session, it all boiled down to, Kat, you've got to get in the open water more and you've got to experience it more to become a better open water swimmer in triathlon. And you know, I was really lucky last year to do some work with Chelsea Sodaro, who ignorantly at the time when I met her in May, I didn't actually know who she was, and she hadn't even done an Ironman at that point in time. And this was the week before she did the Hamburg Ironman. to try and qualify for Kona. And we made all these adjustments for her. Her open water style was fine. The training was good, but the technique that she had, she was trying to make herself a lot longer in the water, take fewer strokes, and she was kicking really, really hard, and finding that she was just completely gassed and out of power by the time she actually got onto the bike. So we looked at that, and we looked at how we could actually tone the kick down by improving the way she's actually catching the water at the front and essentially increasing her stroke rate, as opposed to doing what she'd been told, which was decrease the stroke rate and increase the stroke length. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks, the week later, she actually qualified in Hamburg. She, posted the fastest debutante Ironman time in history, and led out the water from Laura Siddell there. And then she went over to Kona, and lo and behold, she actually won.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
It worked out pretty well for her, yeah.
Well, you've come on to drafting a bit there. Let's talk about that, because I think the experience you've described of Kat and the experience you've described of Chelsea is really common in age group swimmers, which is, I don't do this very often, if at all, hardly ever swim with other people if I do go down to the open water. Drafting is something that might happen by mistake if people are around me. It's getting athletes into a mindset of, there's an extra 1,000, 1,500 people here who can potentially shave minutes off your swim if you know what you're doing. So what are some of the techniques people can use here to really effectively use the other people around them to draft off?
Well, you've just prompted a little bit of a thought there in my mind, actually. I think one of the reasons these, let's call them neo-pros or semi-pros, or people who've got that real potential to be really quite good, they do often excel on the bike and run. And I think one of the reasons they do excel on the bike and run so much is because they're so good at training by themselves,
right,
and knowing what the specifics they are that they need to do on the bike and run to get to that point. So, they recognize that, it might be quite nice to do a cafe ride 4 times a week, but is it really going to help me time trial properly on an open road when I haven't got anyone to draft off, and I'm not allowed to draft? And they're really good at setting their intervals on the run as well. And I think that potentially counts against them maybe when it comes to swimming, for the swimming side of things. Again, really good in the pool, able to do the training volume and stuff and get the sessions done in the pool, but maybe they don't have as much access to swimming with a group of people. And that's what I'd encourage you to do. If you are listening to this right now and you are at that top age group sort of bracket, but your swimming is the big thing holding you back, probably keep doing exactly what you're doing, but maybe make one of your sessions per week, like where you just say, okay, look, it doesn't matter how far I get done in this session, it doesn't matter how fast I go, but I've got to be swimming around lots of other people. I've got to be learning how to draft better, and I've got to be having a little bit of fun as well with it, because that sort of stuff is fun if you make it fun. But I think your attitude towards your biking and running probably leads you to doing the same sort of thing with the swimming, which might not necessarily help you with the swimming. Obviously, in a triathlon, most triathlons, you're not allowed to draft unless you're obviously racing ITU. But with the within the swim, there's absolutely nothing stopping you drafting. In fact, you should embrace it and you should do it and make it makes a huge difference. Yeah. I did a race last year in fact, I'm actually wearing the jumper right now. This ultra swim 33.3K. So it's 33.3Ks over 4 days. A great event. They're running it again this year, actually. And
is this the one out in Montenegro that I've been reading about? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fantastic event. And I was coaching everybody, like literally I coached everybody who did that race leading up into the race. And I'll be doing the same again this year as well. So that involves writing the training program, doing the video analysis and stroke correction when I'm there in Montenegro with them for the days before. And then we do the event. But on this particular event, on the first day, we were swimming into this really, really strong current. And I realized we were doing that. And I realized that if I actually swam an extra little bit of distance to swim off to the left to actually hug the banks of the fjord, then I'd potentially be out of that draft. And I ended up swimming, according to my device, I ended up swimming about 450 meters further than the straight line from point to point. And that was only over 5K. So we're talking about doing an extra 10%. But I ended up coming in 5 minutes ahead of the guy who came in second. And that set me up for the winning the entire event, because there were a couple of stages where I got a couple of, 30 seconds here, a minute and a half extra there, sort of thing. But it was the big win came from that very first event, that first leg of the race. And the point there about the drafting is that obviously on that one, I wasn't drafting. I was just purely by myself, just working with the conditions, working with the currents and the tide and all those sort of things. And just trying to be a bit savvy about it. I wasn't in great physical shape, but I knew the currents and I knew where to swim. And then following that, it became a little bit like the Tour de France, to be honest with you. You know how in the Tour de France, everyone sits in, there's no point attacking unless you need to attack. So then for the next, let's say 20 kilometers, I was either sitting in or sitting with the guy who was in second place, because there was no need for me to try and drop him. And I looked at my heart rate data when I was on the front leading versus when I was actually on the toes of him, just swimming along and, swimming about the same sort of pace. And there was a differential of about 40 beats a minute. It's just insane.
Really?
Insanely different, basically, And that's what I was talking about earlier on, 38% energy expenditure or the ability to swim faster. All I was trying to do in that scenario was conserve energy for each of these subsequent stages and just try and take little wins when I could do. But, you might be doing it because you want to knock off 3 or 4 minutes off your Ironman time and try and actually get up there. So it's really, really important, I think, to recognize that drafting can help you massively, but you've got to practice it. Otherwise it's just not going to feel comfortable and you're not going to be good at it.
It is something that takes effort for people to organize to meet up with other swimmers at the local open water venue. We saw this at our training camp in Mallorca, where we could go down to the sea and there was a really safe little bay. We could set up a circuit that the swimmers all went around, and everybody at the end of it said, I'd never get to do this in training. I've only ever swum with other people in races. If I go to an open water venue, I don't know people and I don't feel, it's almost like a politeness thing. They don't want to get on somebody's feet if they don't know them and have to introduce themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
So for athletes to get together with some friends, or even just to introduce yourself to other athletes at the open water swim to go and do this, is so beneficial for people.
That's right. And I'd even go a step further and say, the obvious challenge, even in that regard, even if you do decide meeting up with, let's say you got 10 of your mates together, so there's a group of 10 or 11 of you, you're still going to have the issue of a spread of ability there as well. So what we frequently do in that scenario is say, okay, you guys, you're not allowed to wear the wetsuit. These guys can wear the wetsuit. It's going to make 3 or 4 minutes difference for them. Or these people can wear a wetsuit and their flippers as well. And it's like I was saying beforehand, you're not worried too much about how much distance you're getting in, or what your Garmin's telling you about how much, what speed you've averaged, or what your training stress score is at the end of it. You're literally going in and trying to create that scenario, which simulates the start of an open water or triathlon event, basically. And you're actively seeking that. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to almost normalize as much as possible everyone's speed, so that everyone can actually swim very, very close together. And you've said it there yourself, Rob, really eloquently, much more so than me, in the sense that if you create a really tight course, that helps with that scenario. So the last thing you want to do is say, right, okay, we're going to swim from point A to point B. It's a 4K swim. Let's try and practice drafting. That's not going to happen. But if you actually create a course which is only 250 meters long, and you've got to do multiple laps of it, even if you start splitting out, it might be that you end up lapping somebody and getting back in there, and it really makes for it. And then, if depending on how structured it is, the coach could maybe blow a whistle, and then you'll have to all turn around and go in the opposite direction and practice it the other way around as well. Brings everyone together. Yeah.
Great ideas. Right, let's talk about navigating in races then. One of the big challenges I get from an athlete is they've worked really hard in the pool all year. They're in great swim shape. They go to a race and we're expecting them to swim 30 minutes for a half Ironman, and they come out on 36 minutes. And they say, I came out of the water, I was in a bad frame of mind. And it was only when I looked at my data when I got back, I realized I'd actually swum 2.4K instead of 1.9K. So they've actually had a really good swim, but they've been zigzagging left to right. And I can still remember tutoring trainee coaches for British Triathlon and using one of the videos you've got on your YouTube channel of where you've videoed athletes and sort of circled around the heads as they come into the beach. And you can see people zigzagging from side to side, can't you?
I think we've even got the Benny Hill tune in the background to that, like that. But yeah, I mean, it's so common to see that, and that the story that you've just given there of 1.9 to 2.3 Ks or what have you. Sometimes people will come out and they'll see the time and they'll be like, damn, still swimming 34, 35 minutes or whatever it might be and stuff. But sometimes people come out and they'll look at their watch and they'll just see their average swim split. And I've seen somebody do 2.3, 2.4 kilometers, and their average swim split was actually really very, very good for them. But then they actually looked at their actual time, and because they had swum that extra 300 or 400 meters, it was a disaster for them. So getting much better with their navigation is super important. And I think the first thing to actually sort of bear in mind with respect to navigation is to make sure you know the course. So if the event organizer publishes the course either on their website or on the day on like a big printout or something like that, go and take a proper look at it and actually start to suss it out. Are you going to be doing 4 turns to the left? Are you going to be doing 3 turns to the right? Is it a triangle? Is it a square? Long rectangle? What if you get down onto the course and actually sort of look down into the distance? What's it going to look like from water level when you're down there, as opposed to maybe you've stood up on a big pontoon or a bridge or something, and what it's going to look like from that height is going to be very, very different to what it's going to look like at water level. So it's important to try and get your perspective and things lined up. And sometimes it's not always possible to do that, of course, but I would always encourage people to just go and, take 10, 15 minutes out of their time just to actually sort of customize themselves with, okay, where exactly am I going to go? And it might be something simple like, okay, I'm going to swim to that buoy there, and behind it, there's a big funky looking tree or a point of a mountain or something like that you can try to actually line those things up with, because chances are when you actually go and raise your head up and sight forwards, you're not necessarily going to see what you want to see dead clear, but you might see the funky shaped tree or the mountain or whatever it might be. And you can sort of say, okay, look, when I started here, that was in that line. I'm drifted off a little bit to my left, so I'm going to navigate slightly to my right there and just keep checking for that. And, in the last show, we talked a lot about your confidence and your ability to swim straight, irrespective of whether or not you're in the open water or what have you. In the pool, you might know that you're constantly bumping into the lane rope, or somebody's always nagging at you that you're drifting into the middle and having a head-on collision. That is a red flag for me, and that should be something you want to try and investigate quite rapidly, because if you know that you drift around even when you're not in the open water, chances are it's going to be really bad when it comes to swimming in the open water. And you might need to sort of sight and keep your head up a little bit further forwards, but that's going to come at a detriment to your speed, because your legs are going to start to sink a lot more. And it can be a real problem. So definitely do anything you can in your training to improve how straight you're able to swim. And we just got this new YouTube video series. I'm just literally this afternoon writing chapter 3 of that series. It's our stroke correction hierarchy. I'm going to be talking all about alignment. And I don't mind saying that now, because the whole series is a little bit of a it's like a bit of a secret. So each week I'll release a new step in the sequence. But by the time you listen to this, that will have all 5 sequences will have probably been released at that point. So we're about to do number 3, which is all about alignment and how to improve your symmetry, your ability to swim straight in the pool to transfer it across well into the open water.
Nice. Well, I think it's a really important thing for people to bear in mind, that as well as the fitness aspect of triathlon, there's the skill aspect of it. And the skill on race day is just as important as the fitness aspect. And most triathletes probably spend more than 90% of the time focused on the fitness aspect, when it's probably a 50-50 determiner of your race day success. So anything that they can try to do in the lead up to a race to help with things like navigation and sighting is really going to help their race day performance as much as the fitness is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm operating currently at 20 to 25% of the fitness level that I'd like to be at this point in time, but I'm still performing well when I'm racing. And I'm putting it down a lot to skill, experience, and just knowing the water and knowing where to swim. And I'm not saying I'm setting world records or anything like that, or winning massive races anymore, sort of thing. But I'm confident that I can get in there and have a pretty good crack It's just simply because I've actually focused on that skill and that experience of, simply being able to swim straight or draft well or turn well around the buoys as well. That's another great skill to be able to have in the open water, especially on tight courses when you've got to do multiple turns. It can save you a lot of time, can that as well. So yeah, quite important for sure.
And I think it's great for triathletes to bear in mind, because we are an aging population. I think it seems like when I started in triathlon, the age group was just above me that was the biggest. I think I was 35 and the 40 plus was bigger. And that demographic has kept on moving above me. And now the 50 plus age group is the biggest demographic in the races in a lot of them. And there's an almost an inevitability we have to accept in some kind of physical decline as the years go by. Maybe not at 50, but I think most people would accept that by 60, there's going to be some kind of physical decline happening. How do we make up for that? Well, you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself that all the training in the world isn't making you faster anymore. But there's all these skill-based aspects that you can practice, and it can make the difference to people's race experience as well. And I think it can be a different focus as people age up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm about to turn 45 this year, and I would say I'm still having some of my best performances now. There are 45-year-olds out there who are doing monsters amount of training, but I'm not one of those people. I'm definitely not one of those people. But I think for me, having that focus on the skill and just enjoying taking that aspect, and also recognizing the fact as well, I've got no grandiose ideas that I should be able to perform at X level when I'm actually only swimming 2 or 3 times per week, sort of thing. That's a really big thing that's helped me a lot, is actually, okay, look, this is all I've got at the moment. This is where my threshold pace is at the moment. It's not going to get me to here, but with a bit of luck on my side and a little bit of experience, a little bit of skill, I might be able to get to here, and that would be a good performance for me. I think I mentioned very briefly on the last show that after 14 years of trying, I finally swam under 5 hours for this 20K swim over here in Western Australia. It's called the Rottnest Channel Swim. It's about 3,500 people do it each year. And I was absolutely elated to have gone under 5 hours for the first time. But the first comment that I got across the finishing line was somebody tapped me on my shoulder and he goes, "Oh, you must be pretty disappointed with that." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I beat you. There's no way I can beat you. And I beat you by a few minutes." And I was like, "Well, thanks, mate, for putting it like that." Yeah, first and foremost, it was like, I was actually genuinely really happy. I felt like I had actually performed the best that I could perform at that point in time. And, in years gone by, I would have beaten myself up and thought, so-and-so, I should have beaten him and stuff like that. But he had a great race. He had a fantastic race. And, and equally, I felt like I had a just race, if that makes sense. I was happy to break the time. It wasn't earth-shattering or anything like that, but I was pleased with it.
That's awesome. I'm really happy for you. It's great you get to finally have that performance you've been shooting for years. You can see the competitor within you still really thrives on that.
Yeah, totally. Somebody was saying to me the other day, he says, "What do you think drove you? Was it the fear of was it the desire to actually join the sub 5 club, or was it the fear of always remaining in the over 5 club?" And I was like, and he goes, "It's definitely the fear of remaining in the over 5. That's what you said. You said you didn't want to ever stay at that point. You want to be able to tell people you've gone under 5 hours. So now I can do, which is great."
Brilliant. Hey, well, listen, Paul, thank you so much for your time and coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. To wrap things up, tell us a little bit about Swim Smooth. Tell us where people can find out more, and tell us about your YouTube series as well, because I think that's the kind of thing that listeners can go and find for themselves, dig into it, and really learn a lot.
Yeah, cool. So we've got our main website at swimsmooth.com. We've got our training platform, which gives you training sessions and training programs, including for triathlon and open water swimming, specifically on the swimming side of things, but for triathlon at swimsmooth.guru. And then you probably want to jump onto our YouTube channel, and you can just go youtube.com/@swimsmooth. And most of our socials are on @swimsmooth as well. So you can check us out there. The 5 series video sequence that we just released, the start of June 2023, if you're listening to this down the line sort of thing, is proving to be really popular, and it's my opportunity to share with people my passion for helping people improve their swimming, starting from the absolute basics using our stroke correction hierarchy. So we've got 5 videos in that sequence, basically to take you from improving your breathing all the way up to improving your rhythm and your timing within the stroke as well. So it's getting great response. I'd love for you to go and check it out, and drop us a comment or a like and a subscribe or something like that, and we'll get right back to you if you've got any questions just on that channel as well.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I can't recommend your videos and your education material highly enough. It was fundamental in helping me learn to become a swim coach when I was moving from just coaching running and cycling way back in the day. I think you've got some fantastic material out there, and it'll really help people out. And I really genuinely appreciate you coming on and taking the time to talk to our listeners.
Thanks very much, Rob. Thanks for having me on the show again.